if I told you that the problem of daughters not being prepared for family business leadership isn't actually a problem at all? What if the real issue is that the families might be looking for the wrong kind of leader? Because here's nobody's saying what nobody's saying out loud, right? The kind of leadership style that builds the empires of the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, and even, more recently than that, it's not exactly the same skill set that's going to take into the next decade. So into 2030, into 2040. It's not exactly that same type of skill set, right? I'm Uyai, and in the last video, I showed you the $10 trillion succession problem. Today, I'm going to show you why the daughters that people might be overlooking might actually be the secret weapon that those businesses need. Now, I have to preface this. Not every family overlooks their daughters, right? Not every family is kind of preparing the sons alone and ignoring the daughters. So I'm not saying that every family is the same. I understand that family dynamics are different from family to family, right? But I do want to speak to those families that feel like they want their daughters to take more advantage, but they're not really in the right place for that to happen, right? And of course, everything I'm saying here about how to prepare a daughter to take leadership also applies to a son, right? Okay, so let me take you back for a second. When most family businesses were built, like in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, right? When a lot of them were built, like what did leadership look like? A lot of times it was very authoritative. It was like, okay, the patriarch or the matriarch or whoever it was that owned the business was like, okay, this is how we're gonna do it. And that's final, right? It was very much like top down, top heavy. It's like, this is what we're going to do. This is what's final. And I say so. That's the end of it, right? But that kind of leadership style doesn't really work very well going forward. It was fine for that time, but it doesn't really work very well, right? That world doesn't exist anymore. Now we have a lot of multi-generational workplaces, right? You might have had somebody who's worked with Papa for 30 years. You might also have somebody who is Gen Z, right? And who, prioritizes purpose over like sitting at a desk from 9 to 5, which is totally fine, but you kind of need different leadership skills to manage those two different kinds of people. Family dynamics are also more complex than ever, right? You might have divorced parents, you might have blended families with like children from both sides of the marriage. You might have cousins who have not spoken in years, right? They might be estranged from each other. You might have people who have gone no contact, but they're still shareholders because of how the business was originally set up. And so there's a lot of like dynamics in families that are a little bit different, and you have to kind of approach them with sensitivity. You have to approach them with wisdom, right? And not just like laying down the law from the top. Like that really just does not work anymore. So the businesses that are kind of thriving right now, they're not usually run by the loudest voice in the room or who's just like pounding their fist and saying, it's my way or the highway. This is how I want it. That's not how they're run anymore, right? And so they're run by leaders who can do a few things exceptionally well. I'm going to run through some of them that I think are really key. Again, this is not all, but I would like to summarize a few of them. One, they can navigate complexity really well. There's nothing really easy about running a business anymore. It's like, what integrations do I need? What people do I hire? When do I need to hire? How do I save for a rainy day? What location should I serve? Should I travel to meet this client, or can I work remotely? There's all that complexity in running a business. They can also build relationships across generations. This is really important because, like I said, you might have a multi-generational workplace. You have that 30-year veteran worker who's worked with Papa. You have a Gen Z, you might have a millennial, you might have different people who work separately. They also think long-term while managing short-term pressures. So it's kind of, sometimes it's difficult to have people who can manage both. It's like, let's see, what can we do best to kind of get through a short-term cash crunch, but also set us up to survive for the next 5 years. Now, when you look at these, ask yourself, who's been training for these skills their entire life? Yes. The daughter probably has navigated these her entire life without even knowing that this is what she's been doing, right? So she might not be able to like communicate that this is what she's done, but she's probably been navigating this her entire life. Now, here's what many families miss. When their sons are being groomed for leadership, the daughters are being trained for it. They just didn't have the right words to say that they were being trained for it. So let me break down what that means. So first, emotional intelligence, right? So sometimes the daughter has to navigate reading the room, for example, understanding what dad really means when he says he's fine with a decision and doesn't say anything else. Sometimes the daughter knows, okay, dad's not really fine with that. And mediating between mom and Uncle James when Uncle James wants to spend on something and mom doesn't want to. So a lot of times the daughter would have that emotional intelligence, right, to understand what's happening, and it's a lot of pressure, right? So it may or may not be like kind of the right kind of pressure, but let's be real that girls are usually under this kind of pressure to kind of help navigate these family situations. So it's not necessarily being nice. You have to reframe this as strategic intelligence, right? So you have to understand that it's not something that you just understand. Like reading the room is not just something that people just get. You'd be surprised at how many people don't get it. And so if you have the skill of reading the room, how do you translate that to strategic intelligence? So imagine this. You work with a third generation manufacturing business where the daughter has to navigate like her father, her uncles, and 5 cousins, and all of them have their own opinion on how things should be done, right? And if she's able to understand people's underlying needs, understand their motivations, like why are they doing what they're doing, finding solutions that honors everyone, that's what's really important. You've got employees who've been there 30 years. You've got employees who've been there like 1 year. How do you manage and make sure that everyone can kind of get together on the same page? Now, okay, so let's see. Here's what I see over and over. Sometimes daughters have been building these relationships for many years. They know the office manager's kids' names. They know when their birthdays are. They know when someone's going to kindergarten. They know when someone's graduating from college, right? This is not just a fluke. It's the way that daughters are trained, and this is a useful skill for keeping the business going. For example, in the first video, I mentioned how sometimes boys are taken to like the external partner meetings, the legal meetings. Now you can understand, imagine the impact when you start sending your daughters to those meetings as well, because she's gonna remember, okay, this is this person's birthday, this is what this person needs, and she's gonna build that relationship, right? And so this is why those relationship skills should not just be seen as like soft skills that have no value. It's fine to kind of have them over there while we're over here building the real part of the business, right? Those are key skills that are gonna keep you in the mind of people to refer business to you. And those are really important skills. And what we need to do is just address the fact that those skills kind of need to just be honed and used properly in the business. So, great. So now let's see what is next here. So adaptive leadership is also really important depending on what the situation is. Sometimes daughters have had to adapt their entire lives. Again, could be right, could be wrong, but in some families, daughters are trained to adapt to different situations, right? If it's overused, we don't want that to happen, right? We don't want someone to like always be adapting and nobody else is making room for them. So I'm not advocating for extremes here. I want a balanced view. However, when it is a balanced adaptation, so when someone is asked to like adapt to situations in real time, that can be a very useful skill for your business. Again, we don't want anyone taken advantage of, but the ability to be adaptive to different situations is a very useful skill. And a lot of times daughters have been raised to be adaptive. So let's take this scenario. Sarah worked in a business for 12 years. She knew like every foreman, every client, but her father kept talking about bringing in external leadership, external people to help take over the business, or her brother who worked in like tech and like had no interest in the construction business whatsoever, and so the largest client came about and was threatening to like pull out because of some supply changes, right? However, because Sarah had like this adaptive ability, she was able to speak to them and just really listen. And at the end of the day, the client really just wanted to be listened to, right? So for him, it was just important to be listened to and have his side of the story told. Now, guess who really knew how to listen to that client properly? It was Sarah, and not her father and not her brother, right? And so because of that, because Sarah was able to save that vendor relationship, her father began to see her in a new light. And eventually she became able to work as a COO in the business. And I feel strongly that if she wants the CEO position in a few years, that she's really going to be able to get it, right? And in this case, I was glad that she was able to kind of put her foot forward and really listen to the vendor and understand what he really wanted to be listened to. But I would also suggest that maybe if you have a son who is kind of struggling with this as well, it's important to like maybe get some coaching, executive coaching, to kind of get to a point where like the son is also able to like listen to the clients and understand what they really want and take in their feedback. So if you have like a son that is also working in the business but needs to build this skill, then an executive coach is something that could probably help with some of these, right? If this video shifted how you think about female leadership in family businesses, do me a favor, share it with one person who needs to see it. A daughter who's doubting herself, or a father who's overlooking his best option. And keep an eye for the third video in this series. It's going to be released really soon. If you want, I have some resources in the comments. So I'm going to post a book I have about succession planning and a workbook as well that will help you kind of understand how to think about succession in the context of your own business. Subscribe so you don't miss video 3 in the series, and leave a comment. Tell me, what's one leadership strength that you have been undervaluing? See you in video 3.